So I have a problem. I am in the middle of approximately like 6 books right now. I barely finished anything in the month of May, but my TBR for May and June is basically the same thing because I didn't end up finishing many of the books that I wanted to read this past month. So, what we are going to do is we are going to do a 24-hour readathon. I want to challenge myself to see if I can not only finish a book, but see how many pages I can get done in several of the other books that I have just kind of had revolving on my TBR for genuinely a couple of months now. So today, what I am focusing on is finally really putting some time into Flashlight by Susan Choi. I have been reading this on and off since the end of April, and that is ridiculous. And then I want to finish Emma M. Lyon Volume 4. This is probably the only thing I gave a significant amount of time to in May. I finished volumes 1 through 3 last month, and honestly, because of how intense my anxiety was last month, just due to some personal issues that were going on in my life, Emma M. Lyon just was the perfect antidote to a lot of that chaotic energy that I was really navigating in May. And then, last but not least, I am working my way through the Count of Monte Cristo. And this is one that I'm doing with a really incredible buddy read group on Substack. And we are just kind of wrapping up our first segment reading through chapters 1 through 30. I'm about 10 chapters behind, so I need to read 10 chapters today. I'm on chapter 30. I need to be on chapter 40. So let's see if we can do it because that is how many pages? Let's just see. From where I am now to chapter 40 is 102 pages. 10 chapters. I think I can do it. I think I've been slowing my reading down with the Count of Monte Cristo because I've been keeping a commonplace journal as I'm reading through this book. Around chapter 20, if I remember correctly, there is an abrupt change in tone and narrator in this story. So we go from Dantes's perspective to a completely different character altogether who doesn't actually have like an immediate stake in what is happening with Dantes. He doesn't know who Edmond Dantes is. Dantes plans to use this character to get close to Fernand and Danglars in a very roundabout way. So Dantes is being very strategic with who he ingratiates himself with. The departure from his perspective into the perspective of some of these other characters was kind of confusing, and I had to like make sure that I was following the story and that Dantes is going by many different names now. We're trying to kind of keep track of who he is and who he's talking to, what his goal is now, how he's going to exact his revenge. So I'm hoping these next 10 chapters will kind of bring us back to his perspective a little bit. But it's kind of a cloudy, overcast day. There's some rain, and I've got a genuinely perfect cup of coffee. My husband brewed an insane batch this morning. So round two is up. I'm going to start reading. I've got my iPad timer here for 24 hours. Let's get that started. All right, here we go. Okay, I've been reading for a little under an hour and I'm actually stopping because I need to make a quick jaunt to Barnes and Noble. There's someone that I follow on Substack. She has a really popular newsletter called Cut and Paste, a magazine all with the purpose of cutting things out and adding them to your commonplace journal or your collages, your junk journal. So I'm going to go see if my local Barnes and Noble has it, and if not, then I'm going to try to place an order online, but I'm really hoping that it will be at the store. Crossing my fingers. Let's go. Okay, so I am back from Barnes and Noble. I was successful in getting the Cut and Paste magazine. The theme on this one is desert landscapes, flora and fauna, nature inspired visual arts, barns, and buildings that have stood the test of time. And I actually thought that that was perfect to have on hand for my upcoming road trip in about a month. My husband, daughter, and my mom and I are going on a like multi-state road. We're literally driving across the country with our ultimate destination being several national parks. So we're going to the Grand Canyon, we're going to Sequoia National Park, Kings Canyon, Yosemite, and then through San Francisco. We'll be there a few days and then up to the Redwoods. And so, kind of looking at some of the pictures that were in this book, I felt like that would be perfect for this upcoming road trip. And then as I was standing in line, Barnes and Noble got me with this impulse purchase. I know we're in June, but I saw the British Vogue with Charlie XCX on the cover, and I love her. I couldn't pass it up. And I don't know, maybe it's just me. I don't really see British Vogue on sale much around here. So I bought it. It was on sale. I'm excited to look through this and like cut things out and stuff too. The photography on her editorial spread looks insane. Shifting gears a little bit as far as my 24-hour readathon goes, I forgot to let the timer run when I was going to Barnes and Noble, but I forgot. So I'm resuming. I am at 23 hours left. I'm going to switch gears to the Count of Monte Cristo. It stopped raining, so I could come outside and sit at this like little table I have on my back porch. I had a pretty successful reading time with Emma and Lion. Let's see, how many pages did I read in like the 40 minutes I was reading? I read about 40 pages, so almost halfway through the book. Volume 4 is so funny. I'm like sitting on the couch cracking up like an idiot, just like to myself. Highly recommend if you have not started the series, but if you have, this was the no spoilers, but this was the part where Emma surreptitiously finds herself an unwilling participant in a can dance in like a sort of like gentleman's gambling club. Her hijinks never cease to amuse me. Really enjoying that, but now I'm going to get a little bit more serious and get back in touch with what's going on with the Count. I have read about 50 pages of The Count of Monte Cristo. I am a little under halfway where I want to be by the end of this 24-hour reading marathon, but I'm going to stop for now. I seem to have like a 40 to 50 page limit before I need to switch to a different book entirely, but I could not believe the tea and the drama that is dropping in this 50-page section that I just finished. I mentioned this earlier in my video, but the Count of Monte Cristo is a sneaky bastard. He is walking around this book with 50 million different aliases. And so when I started reading this, I saw that people felt like it was helpful to have a character map or like a character diagram of who's who, how they're related to each other. And now that I'm as far as I am through the book, I can definitely see why that would be really helpful. I think I might need to start adding character details like that to my notes. I was finding it really easy to keep track of who's who, but now that Dantes, aka the Count of Monte Cristo, is pretending to be like priests and other people, I'm all of these like extraneous characters are coming into the narrative now, having already dealt with Dantes post prison release like years ago. Do you see what I'm saying? It's getting a little complicated. So I'm going to have to start taking some character notes. I am very impressed with how well thought out this deceptive scheme is on the part of Edmond Dantes, aka the Count of Monte Cristo. I'm hoping at some point later in the book, Dumas explains to us how he found all of these people who seemingly have nothing to do or have very casual knowledge of the people of the, three or four people he's really trying to take down. He's left no stone unturned. It really is impressive. One of the biggest things that happened in this section was that Edmond Dantes, again as the Count, was able to meet Mercedes and Fernand for the first time since he was sent to prison. And Mercedes has a very physical reaction to the Count being in her home. She can't quite figure out what it is that she's feeling. Sorry for the dramatic shift in location. It just started raining, so I had to come inside. Mercedes has a very physical reaction and she doesn't quite understand what she is feeling, but she knows that this person that has just stepped into the threshold of her life is going to come with a heavy measure of fate. In fact, in that chapter, when they meet each other, after the Count leaves, Mercedes and her son are talking, and he says he sees the Count as some kind of Byronic figure branded by fate's dread seal. And I can't help but find it so delightfully amusing how heavy handed Dumas is with the dramatic foreshadowing. Either way, he comes with very much an air of mystery, and everyone in his wake is trying to figure out who he is. There's no seat as the Count of Monte Cristo, it doesn't exist. And he's honest about that. Dantes says that he calls himself Dantes calls himself an accidental count. So he's not like trying to pretend that he has this lengthy peerage, but he also tries not to get himself into positions where he has to explain his. But overall, I'm feeling the pace of this book pick up again, which I am liking. I kind of felt like that the section between chapters 20 and 30 felt very much like a fever dream. We were switching perspectives, and that I wasn't expecting that. I kind of thought we would stay with Dantes the entire book. Now we're back to his POV a little bit more, or at least the POV of people who are part of his household. So we're getting a clearer picture of now his attempts to ingratiate himself with Parisian high society to again carry out his vendetta and his scheme of taking down Fernand, Danglars, and de Villefort. Now I'm going to switch gears. I need to eat lunch, and then when I come back, it is going to be time for Flashlight. I'm going to get nice and cozy after my lunch with a cup of tea and think I'm just going to like climb in bed with some comfies and read this one a little bit. Okay, so I have been reading Flashlight by Susan Choi for about an hour. I actually restarted this because again, like I said, it's been a book I've been picking up and putting down since like late April. There's a lot of character establishment that happens right in the beginning of the book. Brief plot synopsis. This is a family dynamics literary fiction about a young girl named Louisa who, while walking the beach in Japan with her father one day, he goes missing. She has no memory of what happens. That's not a spoiler, it's on the back of the book. But what's interesting is that this book rewinds to explore the past of Louisa's father, Cirque, and his wife, Louisa's mother, Anne. Cirque is Korean, but he was born and raised in Japan during Japanese colonization of Korea. We kind of watch how, at the end of World War II, Korea was sort of split in half by the push pull between all of the political powers at the time, including the United States. As history teaches us, the United States backed South Korea's willingness to embrace democracy, and the North Korean part of Korea became what is essentially a closed border dictatorship. Cirque's family leaves Japan to join this idealistic utopia that was pitched to them. He chooses not to go. He's got a bad feeling about it. He's going to go make his way somewhere else. And that is really the last time he sees his family, as far as we know in the beginning of the book. And then the novel switches to Anne, who again is Louisa's mother, and we see her estrangement from her family and how she meets Cirque. And so I'm 60 pages in. I've been reading this about an hour. I really love the tension that is played out in these first few chapters between Louisa and her mother, Anne. I'm extremely curious to see how their relationship has degraded or lacked a foundation in the first place. Obviously, the overarching mystery is what happened to Luis's father, Cirque. Does it have anything to do with with the fact that his family has been living in North Korea for the majority of his life? There's a lot of questions right off the bat that we, as the reader, begin to ask ourselves working our way through this book. So I am expecting further, like, really deep, psychologically driven details about Anne and Louisa and, of course, Cirque. It's definitely gripped me. I feel very like I want to just sit and keep reading this book, but I have to get ready. My husband and I are going out for dinner tonight. While I'm gone, I'm going to keep the clock running and just really get a true picture of how much I was able to read in like an actual 24-hour segment of time. Good morning. I wanted to take my morning cup of coffee and just end up finishing Emma Lyon Volume 4. I was not able to finish it last night. I have about 60 pages left to go. I have 4 hours, 47 minutes, and 38 seconds left on my time clock, so I am going to get to it because I still have to read another several chapters of The Count of Monte Cristo, so let's get going. Evelyn Stewart, you are such a bastard. Okay, so I've been reading a little under an hour. I finally finished Volume 4. What a fantastic volume. I think so far the third, and this is the fourth, the third and fourth have been my favorites. The third novel really shows Emma kind of broadening her community. She's making friendships, she's trying to keep her living going. She's finding ways through these challenges that were set up in books 1 and 2 with her inheritance and just elements of her past that we are slowly learning about in books 3 and 4. In book 4, someone warned me on TikTok that I should like have my tissues ready because volume 4 is really sad, and I kept waiting because frankly for the first literally 80% of this novel it is so funny. She's always finding herself in these ridiculous hijinks or surrounded by good trouble, as one of the characters in the novel says. I was laughing out loud reading this yesterday. It was just these books are such a joy. What I love about the Emma M. Lyon series is that while there is certainly fun and games and she is the ultimate personal curriculum queen, we are following her as she's trying to supplement her poor education. She's always reading, she's learning. She is a lifelong learner and a personal curriculum girly, and I love her for that. But there's also a really beautifully written expression of grief that's happening throughout the books. For the first 2 books, we really understand this lingering sense of grief for the loss of her parents. And in books 3 and 4 specifically, we learn a little bit more about the fact that Emma has lost the love of her life to the Afghan wars, which took place in the 1880s. And as Emma reckons with the ways in which, she hasn't quite come to terms with some of these sustained losses. She's an orphan and she's a young woman. She lost her parents within a month of one another. So grief is an underlying theme in these books. So Emma's gotten herself into trouble. She owes someone a favor. So the large majority of book 4 is her kind of making good on that debt that she owes this particular character. I've also really enjoyed watching her relationships with the Duke of Islington. Let me know how to pronounce that in the comments. The Duke of Islington, Roland Sutherland, young Hawks, who is the vicar, and then finally Niall Pierce, who is a man that is a photographer. He is renting out the studio in her house. She's also renting a room to him. So they're inevitably getting to know one another. And I'm really loving the various ways in which her relationships with each of these men are developing. She also has several female friends that are kind of starting to come back into the story. So she's always with her cousin Arabella because she's trying to help Arabella secure a husband during the season, along with the infamous Aunt Eugenia, who is hilarious in a very ironic way. And then there is Mary, who we don't really see a ton of in volumes 3 and 4, but she is one of Emma's former school friends and they still keep in touch. And then she has sort of an older family friend whose name is Saffronia March. And Saffronia was trained as an artist by Emma's father. So there's kind of a closer familial hold between the two of them, but she's been in Italy for the entirety of the series and just only now came back. So I'm hoping in book 5 we get more of a solid understanding of her female group of friends. We've really been spending a lot of time with her building the sort of male community, which I'm intrigued to see where that goes. But Emma, I continue to enjoy her inner voice. I continue to enjoy the way she is structuring her own lifelong learning and personal curriculum. It is so enjoyable to read about. I feel like the series is making me want to go and read Shakespeare again. She's constantly quoting him and referencing his stories. But if you stop and look it up, you do get a deeper understanding of what she's referencing in its relation to the plot. Of course, that's what a literary illusion is. So, for how like fun these books position themselves to be, there's quite a lot of literary references to kind of navigate and explore in a roundabout way. The Emma and Lion series really encourages you to like establish your own curated study routine, and I'm enjoying the hell out of that. So that's like a little mini review of Emma M. Lion Volume 4. So glad to have finished that. I will be starting Volume 5 later this week. I have all of them from the library sitting on my coffee table in the living room. For now, I have 3 hours and 43 minutes left in my readathon, so I am going to go eat some breakfast, re up my coffee, and then I'm going to see how much more I can read. I need to at least finish another chapter in the Count of Monte Cristo. So I finished my readathon. I'm going to put a total page number up at the end of this video, but I wanted to give some final thoughts on the section that I finished from the Count of Monte Cristo. Overall, I started this readathon on page 468 and I'm ending it on 572. So a little over 100 pages. The Count of Monte Cristo, prior known as Edmond Dantes, he finally meets face to face with the three main arbiters of his betrayal. And that would be Fernand, who is the like sort of childhood friend of Dantes's love, Mercedes. Fernand has since married Mercedes. Fernand was more a betrayal of the heart. Fernand wanted the woman that Dantes loved and who loved him in return. Fernand has become insanely wealthy. He now has like a peerage. He's got massive financial wealth. He has a son with Mercedes. And so the Count is really using Fernand's son to ingratiate himself not only with Fernand's family and Mercedes, but with Parisian society at large. The second person that he is really doubling down his revenge on is Danglars, who was his colleague on the ship at the beginning of the book, which is called the Pharaon. So Danglars' betrayal was largely professional and financial. And the third major player in this web of vengeance is Monsieur de Villefort, and he was at the time the deputy crown prosecutor in Marseille. So he was directly responsible with meting out legal justice. I am very curious to see what his specific method of vengeance is going to be for De Villefort. It kind of feels like like Dantes hates him the most because he's the one who had real power to put him in prison and to take him out of prison. And multiple times de Villefort rebuffed Dantes's desire for, being released from prison for a crime he didn't consciously commit. The web has been spun more or less. He sees the three of them for the first time in like well over 15 years. And it was very interesting to perceive his emotional responses to the variety of individuals that he's attempting to take down. I specifically loved the conversation that the Count, aka Dantes, had with de Villefort in the chapter called Ideology. The two of them have this ideological back and forth as to what true justice means and what vengeance should entail. And at one point, Monte Cristo says that, like every other man, at least once in his life, I too have been carried up by Satan to the highest mountain on earth. There he showed me the whole world as he did to Christ, and he said, "Now, Son of Man, what do you want if you are to worship me?" So I thought for a long time, because in reality, a terrible ambition had long been devouring my soul. Obviously, he's talking about vengeance, hatred, obsession. Dantes tells Satan, "I want to be providence, because the thing that I know which is finest, greatest, and most sublime in the world is to reward and punish." And in this little analogy, Satan says, "No, I can't do that because providence is the daughter of God, but I can make you an agent of providence." And so Dantes says, "Sure, great. The deal was concluded. I shall perhaps lose my soul, but what matter? If the deal had been struck over again, I would do it." And in that moment, obviously, he's not having a literal conversation with Satan, but we are really getting a clear picture of how deeply seated his hatred and desire for vengeance has become in the 15 years since this book began. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I included in today's readathon. What were your thoughts on them? I have been loving your comments on my prior Count of Monte Cristo videos. Keep it coming. If you're currently reading it, let's chat in the comments. I definitely want to do another one of these. Something about like making the content of the readathon really, really pushes me to read more than I would on an average day, which I think is already a lot. But maybe I'll do one later this year and focus that readathon on tackling some of the Booker Prize books, which will be announced later this year. I'll put the specific date on the screen here somewhere, but let me know if that would be interesting to you. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.